Philip, my love, don't leave me.
Hey guys, tonight we're going to explore a dark chapter of history not meant for the faint of heart. The story of Juana la Loca, the queen so consumed by obsession that she carried her husband's decaying corpse throughout the palace. Picture a coffin draped in black velvet, the stench of rot clinging to the drapery, and a soul driven to the brink of madness. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm curious where you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. Leave a comment below to let me know. Ready? Every step through the darkness will unveil the royal family's most shocking secrets, from fiery jealous rages to horrifying rituals of decay. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. How Juana la Loca, whose real name was Juana of Castile, was born in the autumn of 1473 in the Grand Palace at Valladolid. She was the third child, and the only daughter to survive among her four siblings. Her paternal grandfather was King John II of Aragon, who, together with his consort Juana Enriquez, laid the foundations of the Trastamara dynasty on the Iberian Peninsula. Her paternal grandmother, Juana Enriquez, came from Catalan nobility and was renowned for her strictness and devout piety. On her mother's side, her maternal grandfather was King John II of Castile, a gentle ruler with ambitious designs to strengthen his realm, and her maternal grandmother was Princess Isabella of Portugal, who carried the prestigious bloodline of the Portuguese royal family. Juana's father was Prince Ferdinand of Aragon, who would later join forces with Juana's mother, Queen Isabella of Castile, to forge a unified Spain. Ferdinand, nicknamed Ferdinand the Great Christian, first served as Duke, and then became King of Aragon, celebrated for his diplomatic skill and military strategy. Juana's mother, Queen Isabella, known as Isabella the Resolute Queen, was a symbol of Catholic authority and the instigator of a crusading movement spanning many years to restore the faith. Juana grew up between these two powerful figures, bearing from an early age the responsibility of succeeding to two kingdoms despite her tender years. From childhood, Juana was raised in the palace at La Puebla de Montalban, where nuns oversaw her education. She was taught multiple languages, including Latin, Old Castilian, and French, to prepare her for dealings with northern diplomats. In addition, Juana received formal instruction in Christian history, theology, and the art of painting. Her lessons were interspersed with prayer services and sacred music performed by court musicians. Even as a young girl, she displayed a serious demeanor, rarely smiling, and listened attentively to lessons on faith and royal duty. Juana's family was not only rich in power, but also bound by intricate political alliances. The bond between the Castilian and Aragonese thrones was cemented by her parents' marriage, and Juana herself became a crucial link when she came of age. She had two younger brothers, Prince Juan and Prince John, but both died in childhood from illness. Their deaths increased the pressure on Juana to become the sole heir, shouldering the heavy responsibility of preserving peace and prosperity for the realm. Despite her noble lineage, Juana's childhood was not lacking in affection. Her mother, Isabella, spent time conversing with her and imparting lessons in royal ethics, while her father, Ferdinand, often invited historians and explorers to recount tales of the wider world. On mild spring afternoons, Juana and her royal siblings would stroll through the Italianate gardens, listening to birdsong and breathing in the scent of roses. Yet beneath the idyllic scenes, Juana's young heart was quietly absorbing the weighty imperatives of political duty. From early childhood, her fate had been determined more by royal interests and political maneuvering than by genuine love. In the year 1496, at the age of 23, Juana was wed to Philip of Habsburg, nicknamed Philip the Handsome, the son of the Holy Roman Emperor and the grandson of the Duke of Burgundy. This marriage was a calculated step designed to tighten Spain's power across Europe, transforming Juana into the crucial bridge between the mighty Trastamara dynasty and the ambitious House of Habsburg. Although Philip possessed a captivating appearance, with golden hair and a smile that drew every gaze, he was notorious for his philandering and indecisiveness. In contrast, Juana had displayed a hot-tempered nature and intense jealousy since her youth. Whenever Philip was away, she would conjure up imagined affairs in her mind and erupt in fits of rage that shook the palace walls. At first, their union was not without its dramatic flair. Juana would storm into Philip's arms during lavish banquets, snatch his goblet of wine, and confront him before all the assembled nobles. On one occasion, she summoned the entire court to hear vows of fidelity, leaving the aristocrats blushing and embarrassed. Yet all of this was but the usual theatre of high society, where honour and advantage outweighed the matters of the heart. The uproar would quickly subside, giving way to peace rituals, dynastic ceremonies, and the ceremonial exchange of gifts as protocols dictated. Nevertheless, the stark contrast between Juana's fiery temperament and Philip's indifferent demeanour sowed the seeds of later tragedy. Amidst candlelit balls and opulent feasts, they would dance under golden light, yet find themselves lost in a prism of suspicion. Juana would tear at her hair in distress whenever Philip showed overt friendliness toward the court's ladies, while Philip would force a strained smile and turn away in search of another goblet of wine. Before long, tales of the jealous duchess spread to neighbouring kingdoms, becoming the gossip of salons and drawing rooms. The palace kitchens, once redolent with the scent of pastries and herbal teas, now bore the heat of Juana's outbursts and the hollow laughter of Philip. Servants would bow their heads, hastening to clear the platters and wishing the evening would end swiftly. In those first few months, the court still viewed it as a melodrama of protocol. But fate wove a harsh revelation. When the true trial arrived, the fragility of this political marriage would be laid bare. And it was this marriage of political convenience, not one born of genuine affection, that would lead Juana to the doorstep of her greatest sorrow. Everything took a tragic turn in the year 1506, when Philip died suddenly at the age of 28. The shock plunged Juana into profound despair. Legend has it that she refused to allow her husband's body to be interred according to royal protocol. Instead, Juana ordered that his coffin be draped in black velvet and placed beside her throne, transforming her private chambers into an eternal tomb. Rather than observe formal funeral rites and assume her duties before the realm, Juana clung to Philip's corpse, calling the stench of decay the breath of love, and surrendered to a harrowing obsession from which there was no escape. In the weeks following his death, the court still hoped her grief would eventually subside. They tried every consolation, arranging continuous prayer services, spreading incense, burning scented candles, and boiling ginger water. Some even suggested spraying diluted vinegar around the coffin to neutralize the odor, but Juana steadfastly refused. She insisted on opening the coffin to gaze one last time at her husband, despite the body's increasing decomposition. Contemporary accounts describe Juana sitting by the coffin for hours, her hand gently touching the blackened flesh, her eyes misty as if peering into the departed soul. She would whisper tender words, "I am here, do not leave me." The stench clung to the velvet shroud, seeping into every fold and latching onto her hair and attire. When a servant quietly approached with food, Juana would hiss, "Do not disturb me. Leave me alone with him." End of sat. Every attempt to bring her back to reality ended in rage or panicked tears. They tried every fragrance from jasmine to tuberose and even precious oils imported from Arabia. Yet these only blended with the stench, creating an even heavier atmosphere. The royal physicians advised Juana to let Philip rest before the decay spiraled out of control, but she only shook her head, eyes bloodshot and fierce. "If he no longer smells of life, I will die too." Oh, day by day the odour spread through the palace corridors. Servants masked their faces and tiptoed to perform duties, departing in hush. Clergymen, after repeated outbursts from Juana, finally gave up. Rumours circulated that the queen slept beside her husband's corpse as part of a failed resurrection ritual. The room where Juana and the coffin coexisted grew darker and more silent than ever. She ventured out only at night, leading the velvet-covered coffin down the silent halls. This grim procession left the court both horrified and heartbroken. At 28, Philip's death had set in motion an endless tragedy, an ordeal where love, power, and madness intertwined. From that point on, the coffin could not be separated from Juana. Under the escort of soldiers and clerics, she carried it across the realm of Castile, by day through sunlit palaces, by night along silent highways. Whenever the procession halted at a monastery or castle, Juana ordered the coffin's lid opened and leaned in to inhale the stench, a smell that had become the new fragrance in her private world. It was said that the odor of mold and decay clung to everyone's garments and hair, impervious to even the most thorough laundering. The sight filled onlookers with horror, yet for Juana, it was the sole reality. She saw the rot as living proof of her undying love for Philip. At first, the court felt pity and hoped that after the long journey, Juana's grief would soften. They arranged consolatory rites, inviting clerics to hold services at every stop of the procession. Envoys from neighboring kingdoms were even received to witness the mourning and share compassion. However, month after month, the stench pervading the palaces left many gasping for relief. Whispers of the queen sleeping with her husband's corpse spread swiftly through the countryside. Villagers claimed that when the cortege passed their fields, the foul odor seeped into the crops, wilting grain and despairing livestock. Children fled from the main roads, while adults bowed their heads, stealing fearful glances at the coffin from afar. Before long, Juana ceased to be the proud princess of legend, becoming instead a chilling embodiment of power intertwined with death and decay. Gradually, the palace gates slammed shut in Juana's path, as many nobles sought to avoid her presence. They dared not return her courtesies, silently dipping their heads before turning away. Records of these morbid rituals were inscribed in the ledgers at every rest stop, to the point that the phrase, "the Queen of Stench," appeared in officials' journals. Despite the shifting public mood, Juana remained convinced that only by breathing in the pungent aroma of decay could Philip's soul remain close. She sat beside the coffin, placing her faith in each billow of decomposition, her eyes languid but resolute, never relinquishing her grip. This haunting tableau imprinted itself on the memories of ladies-in-waiting, scholars, and common folk alike, leaving a terrifying legacy of a queen immersed in the fragrance of death. The period that followed witnessed Juana's complete physical and mental deterioration. Her chambers grew pitch dark, with windows and doors barred to keep out any breeze. The air became oppressive, saturated with the stench of the corpse mingled with the acrid smoke of burning candles, pungent vinegar, and rancid herbs. From the stained yellow mattress to the moss-covered basin, every surface bore the imprint of decay and mold. Juana's hair, once sleek and flowing, now lay matted in a tangled bun infested with lice. The cloying foul odor clung to her person relentlessly. Servants entering her room had to carry spare linens because the stains on the sheets spread unchecked. Many initially tried to persevere in their duties, only to flee within days, vomiting and reeling from the unbearable smell. Those who could not withstand it abandoned their posts, escaping into the night in search of fresh air. Juana completely forsook personal hygiene. She no longer cared to comb her hair or bathe. Her skin grew rough, and her garments hung wrinkled, coated in dust and decay. Nail care, fragrant oils, and any grooming rituals became luxuries she no longer acknowledged. Even in transit, Juana refused to let doors close. She commanded guards and the nuns in escort to heed her every footstep and the muffled moans emanating from her husband's coffin in the adjacent chamber. By the faint candlelight, they watched her shuffle forward slowly, her expression vacant in the dim glow. All were required to follow the path of stench she mapped out, avoid touching any surface, steer clear of the basin, and step only on the grimy yellow stains on the cold stone floor. The relentless decline of her body and mind shattered Juana's image in the eyes of her people. Once a symbol of regal authority, she had become an object of revulsion and dread. Rumors spread that the foul odor had permeated the walls. Even sunlight and cleaning failed to remove the stains and mold. Many officials refused to enter her rooms unless summoned by an order of urgency. Night after night, Juana halted her procession so she could pray alongside her husband's body before resuming her journey. The candles hissed, vinegar fumes curled in the air, and the stench wove a haunting haze around each corridor. Only after she concluded her ritual would they depart, their steps heavy and laboured, desperate to put distance between themselves and the coffin. Beyond the palace gates, news of Juana's procession of stench travelled swiftly. Nobles and their wives whispered at gatherings, debating whether to extend her a formal welcome. In salons and courts, they spoke of the sealed chamber where light was forbidden and decay venerated like a deity. Gradually, Juana la Loca's figure transformed into the darkest legend of the dynasty. She was no longer the powerful queen crowned in gold, but a spectre moving through the palace with a rotting coffin in tow. Every attempt to restore her to political duties failed. Her obsession and dissolution had forever erased the regal status she once held in the hearts of her people. In the year 1509, Juana was forced by her family to enter the convent of Tordesillas, where she lived in isolation with Philip's coffin for over 40 years. The limestone walls of the convent, once plain, now stood covered in grey-green mould. The narrow window slits let in only slivers of sunlight, insufficient to dispel the stifling heat. The polished stone floors, once gleaming, became damp and stained yellow, a testament to the foul odour seeping from the coffin each day. What was once a magnificent palace had transformed into a silent prison. Servants arriving at the heavy wooden door now wore vinegar-soaked cloths over their faces, silently serving cold rice with faded garnishes before retreating like skittish snakes. The air in the chamber was thick with the sharp tang of vinegar and the acrid smoke of half-burned incense, unable to mask the scent of decay. The basin by the corner remained filled with murky water, its scummy surface sending a chill down anyone's spine. Legend holds that each morning, Juana felt true comfort only when she inhaled that unmistakable stench. She would wake, draw back the heavy drapes, and lean close to the coffin to savour the fragrance that alone made her feel secure. To Juana, that pervasive odour was a breath from the past, a constant reminder of her undying love. She seldom stepped beyond the convent's walls. To her, the outside world where her son Charles V reigned as Holy Roman Emperor and King of Spain seemed like a distant dream. Politics and proclamations held no meaning for her. As years turned to decades, the Tordesillas residence grew ever more silent. The stench permeated the walls so thoroughly that even after cleaning, brown stains persisted. Occasionally, a servant sweeping the stone floor would reveal the same grimy yellow residue. The haunting odour spread beyond Juana's chamber, wafting through corridors, causing rare visitors to sniff the air, bow their heads, and depart hastily. For 40 years, Juana resigned herself to this fate. She spoke little, murmuring constant whispers to her husband's body, telling Philip of trivial daily happenings or begging him not to leave her. At night, 2 tall candles flickered under the canopy, casting her in a ghostly glow as she sat motionless, delirious, before the black velvet shroud. Clerics passing her door would bow their heads silently, too fearful to utter a word, performing their duties and hurrying away. In the year 1555, after nearly half a century of confinement, Juana finally passed away within her solitary chamber. Her body was placed beside Philip's in the coffin and, for the first time in decades, carried out of the secret room. Witnesses recalled that the putrid stench still clung to the walls and stone floor, impossible to cleanse. The rustling mould in the cracks and the whisper of wind through the narrow window created an eternal dirge of sorrow. Thus ended the tragic life of the woman known as Juana la Loca, the queen who lived in obsessive decay and madness. Her whispers of the past, the stench of memory, and the everlasting presence of a coffin etched an indelible mark upon history, leaving behind a mournful legacy that time cannot erase. In the year 1509, Juana was finally placed by her family into the convent of Tordesillas, a fortified castle on the banks of the Duero River. Instead of continuing her reign as queen, she became a prisoner of her own kin. The once gilded doors were now covered with thick planks of wood and heavy felt to keep Philip's spirit contained. The windows, narrow as cracks, allowed only a faint sliver of light to touch the stone floor before being swallowed by creeping mould and chimney smoke. Within her chamber stood only a sturdy wooden bed, 2 simple chairs, a few chests of herbs, and a basin brimming with vinegar. The scent of smouldering embers mingled with the acrid perfume of half-burned incense and the persistent odour of her husband's corpse, rendering the air viscous, like congealed resin. Each time a servant entered, they had to follow the pathway of stench Juana had dictated. Step once past the mossy patch, skirt around the coffin, and pause on a grimy, blackened smudge on the stone floor. They wore vinegar-drenched cloths over their faces, their eyes cast downward as they swiftly presented a bowl of cold gruel topped with a few stale biscuits. Then, like startled snakes, they slipped away without a backward glance. This routine looped endlessly, freezing time itself within the oppressive realm of decay and dying candlelight. Mornings at Tordesillas began in a thick haze of vinegar fumes. Juana would awaken to the creak of old wooden doors and the feeble glow of dawn slipping through the narrow apertures. She drew back her velvet drape and bowed her head before the coffin, inhaling deeply so that the pungent aroma flooded her senses. Only after this ritual would Juana hoist herself from her bed and shuffle to the vinegar basin to rinse her hands with cloudy liquid. Yet, no matter how thorough the wash, the oily film clung to her skin, indelible and mocking. Life in her secluded cell was measured by the darkening of the walls and the number of times a candle flickered and died. When the final wick burned low, Juana would sink into silent vigil in the shadows, her dull eyes fixed on the stillness surrounding the coffin. The heavy doors remained sealed, save for the whisper of the wind outside, sounding like unseen voices murmuring of despair. Each sigh of the darkness bore witness to her unending torment. For over 4 decades thereafter, the convent of Tordesillas stood unchanged. Juana remained in that chamber, living quietly amid the fragrance of death and her eternal coffin. She no longer heard the court minstrels, nor attended any royal assemblies. Only the 2 cold chairs and dusty herb chests bore witness to her solitude. The one constant was that stubborn stench, forever reminding her with each breath of the relentless ache that consumed her obsessed heart. Juana's existence revolved around her ritual of stench to the point that it became an unwritten law within the convent. Each morning, she commanded the coffin's lid to be opened so she could inhale the odor of decay, a moment that affirmed her undying love for Philip. The attendants would gingerly bring in each basin of aged herbs, sprinkle in pungent vinegar, and light incense to fumigate the chamber. Yet all these scents only mingled with the overpowering stench, unable to mask it. Yellow stains crept across the walls, stubborn remnants of the corpse's breath that no amount of scrubbing could erase. Juana whispered to the nuns, "If I do not breathe in that scent, his soul will drift away." Her words echoed through the solemn air, reminding all present of the sacred bond that could not be severed. Each inhalation saw Juana close her eyes and purse her lips, as if she could still feel a fleeting warmth in the decaying embers of her husband's body, proof, she believed, of their eternal devotion. Within her cell, 2 basins of water had fermented into a slimy, dark film, their surfaces glinting with oily residue and scum. Juana performed only a symbolic hand wash, dipping her fingers into the tainted water, then gently wiping them across the hem of her robes. The sharp tang of vinegar melded with her sweat, seeping into the fabric and leaving a mark that refused to wash away. Her hair lay in an unkempt mass, matted into a tangled bun that defied any brush. Lice scuttled through the wood dust caught in its knots, never once disturbed by a comb. When a timid nun suggested wiping her face, Juana turned away, covering her nose with her hand, and uttering each breath with a growl. "Do not disturb me." Her eyes were heavy with exhaustion, yet her voice retained an unwavering resolve. No one dared stir in the oppressive silence. All knew that any interruption to the morning's stench ritual would unleash the Queen's fury. Faint light filtering through the high window slit illuminated the dark streaks of oily residue on the stone floor, painting a murky tableau carved from shadow and decay. Time in the Tordesillas cell crawled forward. The incense smoke and vinegar fumes swirled around Juana, trapping her in a relentless cycle of obsession. Her sighs blended with the barely audible drip of condensation on the walls, composing a lullaby of weary decay with no end. In that miniature world, decomposition was not an ending but a testament to a love so fervent it transcended death itself. As time passed, the obsession with the stench caused Juana to lose all sense of direction. She scarcely slept through the night. Often awakening between dream and reality, she would sit upright on her bed, whispering into the emptiness or tapping her fingers on the coffin's lid, as though trying to summon her husband back from death's embrace. Philip's corpse remained motionless within, while Juana murmured fervent pledges. "Hear me. Please don't leave me." Her body grew emaciated dry, wrinkled skin stretched over protruding cheekbones, her eyes hollowed like bottomless pits reflecting an uncanny confusion. Occasionally hunger would strike briefly. Juana would grasp a brittle rusk and chew it without breathing, so as not to dissipate the pervasive odor in the air. When a servant dared to present meat, she did not swallow. The dish would be flung to the floor at her touch, as if to let Philip's decaying form decide whether it was fit to be eaten. Her failing strength meant Juana could no longer move the coffin alone. She relied on the nuns to assist, and they recounted her footsteps as if part of a macabre ritual. Slow, deliberate steps, her eyes fluttering closed as her hand pressed on the lid. The faint crackle of incense and the drip of vinegar merged with her laboured breathing to compose a sombre melody echoing down the corridors. Each step became a prayer for Philip's soul. Juana whispered ceaselessly, lest her voice be lost in the stillness. Her murmurs stretched into the night, sending shivers through those who aided her. They recalled nights when Juana remained awake, rapping insistently on the coffin, as if awaiting an answer from beyond the grave. Gradually, her frame weakened further hands, trembling, voice barely above a whisper of supplication trapped in the narrow chamber, suffused with stench and dim candlelight, the only world Juana recognized. With every procession, she repeated this grim rite, as if determined to cling to Philip's final warmth, regardless of her own soul and mind slipping away. This spectral image of Juana left its mark upon the convent. Observers spoke of her silhouette behind the heavy black drape, her gaze misty yet resolute, like an indomitable phantom refusing to abandon a love long since decayed. It was the tragic dirge of a queen driven to madness, living between life and death amidst the unending obsession with rot. Even her children could not escape Juana's merciless obsession. When the young princes, cradled by grief, begged permission to bury their father, Philip the Handsome, Juana exploded in furious wrath. She rebuked them as traitors attempting to steal Philip's soul, insisting that only the stench and breath from his remains could keep him by her side. She forbade any direct encounter, allowing them only to stand beyond a narrow window slit, catching a glimpse of their mother through the crack. Little Catherine, barely a toddler, was confined within that dim cell of the convent. She witnessed her mother whispering into the darkness beside the coffin, her small hand resting on the damp wood. Catherine's soft sobs echoed against the cold stone walls, haunting the nuns who cared for her. They spoke of hearing the child's fragile dress rustle through the thick gloom of vinegar and decay, as sorrowful as a lullaby. Gradually, the servants, unable to bear the stench any longer, abandoned their posts one by one. Those still able-bodied were reassigned to the stables, where the smell of manure, though foul, was considered more tolerable. Only the most tenacious remained, their vinegar-soaked cloths over their faces and heads bowed each time they served Juana. They avoided her wild, unfocused gaze as one might avoid a prowling beast. The royal children's meals diminished to chipped porcelain bowls holding cold rice and bland scraps of dried bread mixed with crushed herbs. Catherine would sometimes plead, "Mother, may I hold him one last time?" Juana would only shake her head, her faded eyes carving their mournful mark onto the dark walls. Prince Charles, in vain attempts to console his siblings, was allowed only to peer through the slit, listening to Catherine's cries and their mother's murmured prayers, unable to venture closer. Juana's family life collapsed into ruin. Each child grew up amidst terror and the lingering stench. Dreams of their father drifted through night air thick with decay. Occasionally, a faint rap upon the coffin signaled Juana's nightly supplications, drawing the court into a fearful silence as that eerie sound echoed through the dark. It became a world where both maternal love and filial bonds dissolved into fragments and rot, leaving an indelible mark of horror that no amount of daylight could erase. Juana lived in isolation for over 40 years. Her hair turned snowy white, the veins on her hands standing out beneath parched skin. Her son Charles ascended the throne as Holy Roman Emperor, ruling across Europe, yet Juana remained almost entirely unaware. To her, the world was confined to that dark chamber, where her coffin of love, draped in black velvet, and the relentless stench formed her entire reality. All political affairs, courtly matters, and proclamations of glory faded into distant dreams. Juana no longer heeded the trumpet's blast or the herald's songs. She only listened to the soft crackle of incense, the hiss of dying candles, and the ragged rhythm of her own breath. Each morning she rose to perform her morbid ritual, pressing her face against the coffin lid, as if awaiting a final breath of life. When Juana passed away in the year 1555, her body was removed from that secret chamber for the first time in nearly half a century. The gates of Tordesillas castle were opened to admit the first breeze, carrying a hint of winter's chill and unfamiliar light. The damp stone walls bore yellow stains. The faded murals were mottled with grey mould, and the indelible odor of decay lingered everywhere, impossible to wash away. Witnesses recounted how, as the prison door cracked open, a rush of fresh air swept away the lingering incense smoke, revealing a scene of terrifying remnants. The coffin rim marked with tarnished silver, the heavy stillness of a decades-old vigil, and the pervasive imprint of rot. Those present were struck with awe at the somber evidence of a tragedy unlike any other. Juana la Loca's death closed a profoundly tragic chapter. From a powerful heir to a fanatic recluse, imprisoned by her own obsession with death, her image as a queen living among ghosts and decay became a dark legend of unchecked power and madness. History remembers her name as a stark warning. When authority is severed from humanity, it becomes a cruel shackle, imprisoning its own bearer in a shadow of fading self. Over the decades, Juana's ritual of stench grew ever more severe and ceremonial. Each day, she summoned her attendants to open Philip's coffin at an exact hour, as if marking a private time zone for her unshakable obsession. Faint candle flames flickered beneath the black velvet canopy. Incense smoke hung heavy and sullen, and the stench of decay rose to the vaulted ceiling in a silent shroud. Juana murmured prayers into the gloom. "Where are you? Can you hear me?" Then she would slowly lay her gaunt hand upon the darkened flesh, inhaling deeply so that the odor flooded her lungs like an opiate, rendering reality blurred and distant. Whenever a cold draught slipped through the narrow window slit, Juana would tremble, fearing Philip's spirit would be carried away on the breeze. She would shout, commanding the doors to be bolted, and instruct her attendants to place extra bowls of vinegar and bundles of incense at the threshold to restrain the wind's power. The contrast of flickering flame, dense incense smoke, sour vinegar, and rotting flesh produced a unique aroma that Juana called an undying soul. For her servants, every step within that chamber became a harrowing ordeal. They had to walk upon pre-laid cloth strips to avoid contact with the floor and prevent the stench from clinging to their skin. Their trembling hands adjusted the fabric, their gaze fixed upward to avoid the globs of coagulated oil staining the cold stone. Any misstep, a stray footfall, a breath too deep could spell asphyxiation, forcing them to flee at once. Servants whispered that during the ritual, approaching the coffin felt like entering the netherworld. The sound of labored breathing, the crackle of incense ash settling, and Juana's fervent whispers resonated as though from beyond the grave. They recalled the first time they touched the coffin lid, feeling the damp wood and inhaling the concentrated stench, a blend of old wine and spoiled brine. Many thereafter suffered headaches, nausea, and begged to be released from their duties, never to return. Gradually, the number of attendants willing to serve Juana dwindled. Those who remained moved silently, heads bowed, performing their tasks quickly before retreating into the darkness. All felt exiled in that realm of rot and flickering candles. In that space, time lost its meaning. Only the daily ritual of decay persisted, repeated endlessly, as the sole act of worship for a heart reduced to ashes. Juana's mania once struck fear into the entire royal house. When her eldest son, Prince Charles, officially ascended the throne as emperor, the nobility held out hope that she would awaken to take part in the grand coronation ceremonies. Yet Juana merely nodded dully and turned her face away, as though she no longer recognized the esteemed child she had borne. By the dim candlelight, she bestowed her sole affection upon Philip's coffin, viewing anyone who dared approach it as an intruder to the sacred relic. On one occasion, when her two sons begged to touch the coffin's lid in homage to their lineage, Juana flew into a rage, issuing a strict ban. "You are traitors seeking to steal my husband's soul." The fragile bond of blood between Juana and her family gradually cracked into a deep fissure. Queen Isabella of Castile passed away, leaving a lingering sorrow in Juana's heart, while Ferdinand fell gravely ill and had to focus on royal affairs in Aragon. Charles, burdened by his duties as emperor, had no choice but to entrust his mother to the convents and slowly drift away from her. Within the Trastamara Habsburg lineage, the duty of state collided with genuine parental love, while Juana sank even deeper into the abyss of madness. She regarded Philip's coffin not merely as an inanimate object, but as her final throne, placing absolute faith in it. Now the royal residence no longer bore the bustle of family gatherings. Only Juana and the black velvet pall draped over the coffin remained. Each step she took rent the silent air like a mournful tolling bell. On the chamber walls, the murals depicting Charles's coronation had faded, but the odour emanating from Philip's remains remained as pungent as ever. Ever since Charles became emperor, she refrained from all courtly events. Even as banners fluttered to welcome the king, Juana sat in her darkened room, gazing at the coffin as if awaiting a miraculous resurrection. Courtly celebrations now unfolded in distant palaces, far from Tordesillas. Rumours circulated of Juana's grim fate, from a potent heir to a reclusive fanatic. People spoke of her as a spectre wandering among the dead, a chilling fusion of power and madness that no one could forget. Tales of the queen who slept with a corpse spread across Castile and throughout Europe. Peasants whispered that whenever the fetid procession rumbled through a village, the soldiers and clerics accompanying it moved in silence like ghosts, while Juana's frail figure stooped low, her eyes ablaze with timeless sorrow. They said the black velvet carriage swayed with every step, and the stench of her husband's remains was so potent that wheat fields seemed to wilt in its wake. Legend held that Juana had struck a pact with the devil to bind Philip's soul to her forever. Those who dared mock or expressed horror were rumoured to suffer sudden misfortunes, failed harvests, livestock dying mysteriously, and villages shaken by storms that tore off rooftops. Elders cautioned that if one encountered the procession at twilight, it was best not to gaze upon the coffin directly, lest one's own spirit be ensnared by the dead. Chroniclers and historians later wrote that Juana's example was a living testament to love's destructive might. In annals, she was called the Black Velvet Spectre, a symbol of a deranged heart where agony and decay had become faithful allies. Monasteries across Europe preserved accounts of the stinking queen as a warning to anyone who believed sovereignty could master the human soul. In their treatises, scholars analysed how Juana did not merely fall victim to political machinations, but was driven into a psychological abyss by her own crown and her grief. They described scenes of her kneeling in the dark beside her husband's corpse, her hushed petitions seeming to lull the corpse itself, yet echoing the fracture of her own spirit. Historians recounted that when the procession crossed the borders into Austria or Italy, locals poured into the streets, only to shriek in terror or faint from the border-crossing stench. These reports reached the flourishing Spanish court, which recoiled in fear, banning all mention of Juana from court records and forbidding her name in diplomatic ceremonies. Playwrights in religious dramas staged scenes of Juana wandering beside the coffin, a cautionary tableau. Love gone awry will destroy its devotees. In monasteries, abbots warned novices, beware the heart consumed by passion, lest it bind you in endless torment. Although the tale took on mythic elements, no one disputed that the shadow of Juana la Loca left an indelible mark on Europe's memory. She became a dark legend, a sorrowful mirror of power divorced from humanity. In her private realm, where anguish merged with the scent of decay, she composed a lullaby so sleep-inducing that both nobility and common folk found it impossible to escape its haunting refrain. After Juana's death in the year 1555, the walls of Tordesillas castle were finally flung open for the first time in nearly half a century. Standing before its heavy stone gates, visitors froze as they stepped into the room steeped in lasting dread. The limestone walls were streaked with deep black stains, patches of damp mould dotted like dried blood. Beneath their feet, the marble floors bore splotches of moisture-murky droplets from the vinegar baths Juana once commanded. Above, the wooden ceiling still carried the acrid residue of half-burned incense, smoke mingling with the lingering stench of the corpse that had never truly faded. Everything seemed frozen in the nightmare that had spanned 46 years. No sound broke the hush, except the faint click of the heavy doors. Those who first dared enter the former prison were chilled to the bone. The dim light that slipped through the narrow window cast a pale glow on the tattered black velvet coffin beside dusty herb chests and yellowed cloth scraps strewn across the floor. In a simple frame hung a portrait of Juana la Loca, her dreamy eyes gazing down the silent hallway, still yearning for the miracle she had awaited the day Philip would rise and banish her pain. Witnesses spoke of the stubborn odour that clung even then, refusing to dissipate after so many years. Though the windows were opened wide to welcome fresh air, the yellow stains on the walls and the dark soot on the ceiling held fast. Every step echoed on the damp threshold, and the faint shafts of light filtering through cracks painted the room in sombre hues, each footfall tolling like a sorrowful bell. The legend of the ghost of Juana la Loca quickly trailed the waves of tour groups. Guidebooks urged travelers through the deserted hall, recounting the queen's obsession as they paused by the oil-stained walls. On glimpsing the time-worn coffin, many visitors shivered, as if tasting the breath of a bygone era's final exhalation. The sight became a stark reminder. In the spectacle of power's downfall, if the heart lacks strength to bear grief, one may lose humanity and cling instead to death itself. Processions of tourists moved silently through the ancient corridors, hanging on the guide's hushed tones, equal parts dread and pity. The story spoke unspoken truths. Authority cannot expunge sorrow. Within these 1,000-year-old stones, Juana la Loca's legacy resonated in every brick, a haunting lullaby that lulled all who entered into a somnolent sorrow from which there was no awakening. Through the dark journey of Juana la Loca, today's audience is not only granted the satisfaction of their curiosity about a gruesome page of history, but is also invited to reflect on their own lives. First, the video vividly portrays how unacknowledged and unhealed grief can transform a person into a slave of their own obsession. Juana, once a powerful queen, became a prisoner of both mind and body, living in madness beside her husband's corpse. The message here is not a mere plea for sympathy, but a reminder of the power of a healthy psyche. When faced with suffering, if we cannot find an outlet, we risk spiraling into self-destruction. Second, the video highlights the importance of balancing reason and emotion. Juana surrendered her reason to overwhelming passion, causing all her moral values, duties, and familial bonds to collapse. In modern life, we too are often swept up by intense feelings. Love, jealousy, ambition, and without vigilance, we can lose our way and damage our relationships. Maintaining equilibrium, knowing when to let go and when to confront with patience and wisdom, is an invaluable lesson viewers can apply immediately. Third, the story demonstrates the power of our connection to the past and to memory, whether positive or negative. Juana clung to her past so tightly that she could not move forward, resulting in total paralysis. By contrast, contemporary life teaches us to cherish our memories without being buried by them, to preserve beautiful recollections for motivation, and to release painful wounds to continue growing. This is how we enrich our souls and live in harmony with our past without letting it become a chain. Finally, the video conveys the value of sincere and healthy love. Juana loved Philip with all her body and soul, but without necessary boundaries, her love became a deadly obsession. In today's world, true love is not about possession or attachment, but about respect, sharing, and building trust. When we love someone, we must not turn our hearts into prisons. Rather, we should let our affection become a source of mutual support. In summary, after watching this video, viewers can take away 3 practical values. First, the importance of confronting and healing psychological wounds. Second, the maintenance of balance between reason and emotion. And third, the ability to honor the past without allowing it to bind our future. These are timeless lessons that still hold great power to illuminate one's path of self-development and to nurture relationships in the 21st century. No matter how gruesome the story may be, its core message remains a reminder: power and passion only truly matter when they serve our happiness and humanity.